toner that was switched out, or if it were other parts.
No, it's just the toner and
Okay.
developer.
Gotcha.
All right. So we'll just get cracking at this. First thing you need to know is that you can't trust what the printer is telling you as far as the toner levels.
Right.
Because those levels, the ceramic toner is much more dense and heavier than the organic toner.
Right.
So we could only put about 150 grams or so into the printer. Otherwise it'll wear out the motors that auger the toner down into the photoconductor units a lot quicker. So yes, it is a two-component printer. So there's toner and then the developer, which is a mixture of iron and toner. Most of the maintenance you'll need to perform yourself would just be checking the toner levels, clearing misfeeds, and clearing streaks in the photoconductor unit. And the first thing we'll go over is checking the toner. It's probably the most simple. Because on this menu, over time, it'll start telling you that the toners are level or low, or that there'll be a question mark at the particular color. But you can never trust what it says.
Sure.
So to check those levels, just open up the top of the printer here, and just pull out whichever color is in question. And then you just knock all that toner down, and if you hold it up to a good light source, you can see where that level's at.
Yep.
And that's pretty much as you would want in it at a given time.
Okay.
So typically they come full about there with organic toner, so that's why you can't trust those levels. The sensors just don't pick up on this little bit.
Okay.
And it is possible to coat out the caps. So if you deplete the toner completely from the cylinder, you may have to replace the caps. So always check your levels and make sure that you've got at least to where it fills just about in there. Once it just fills this knob here, that's when you want to refill it.
Okay.
Okay? And to refill it, opposite this side with the sticker that tells you the color, is this little door. So you just push down and sort of slide it down at the same time. Oops. Just don't want to spill any. Alright. And you got this little hole here.
All right.
And your printer will come with bottles similar to that as you see on the shelf. So you just snip the cap off your toner cylinder and then, or the bottle, and then fill it up like so.
Right.
Alright.
How hazardous is that stuff?
Well, it's just like any fine powder. You definitely don't want to make a mess of it and breathe too much. If you're going to be doing like lots of work on the printer, say you're checking all the cylinders and you're trying to clear a bunch of streaks, another thing you may have to do down the road is filter to the developer mixture, because the ceramic developer can get clumpy if you don't keep an eye on your humidity. And typically you want to keep it between 30 and 40%. So if you're going to be doing lots of work, you definitely want to wear like just a mask, fine powder mask or something like that. But other than that, you know, just checking one cylinder, or even if it's just all of them, as long as you're not making big plumes, you'll be alright.
Nothing as far as skin touching or anything like that?
No, it's not. No, not at all. It does make a mess,
Right,
so it's always a good idea to wear gloves too.
Right.
But yeah, no hazard as far as touching
Right.
it. Okay, and then once you're ready to put the cylinder back into the machine, you just turn it upside down. Make sure all the toner is back at the black cap so that it augers into the machine nice and easily. And then sort of just want to slide it in like so, lock it into place, and then you can close the top of the machine and continue printing.
Alright.
You just want to have some hands on and try and check one of the cylinders yourself.
I can.
Cool.
Check the black. You said it just slides straight out?
Yeah, you just pull it straight out.
Alright.
And the black is probably the hardest one to see, so it takes a bit to let it settle and then you'll be able to see those levels.
Appears to be there.
Yeah, that looks about right.
If I were to need to fill this, this goes in.
Yeah, you just sort of press down on that knob there and then slide it down. There you go.
So I don't make a mess. Basically going in there, correct?
Correct.
And then this slides back up. And that locks, correct?
Yeah, it just sort of slides into position. Sometimes you can push it off, and if that happens, you just got to work it so you could put it back in. It's not too difficult to get it back into place.
Yeah, got it. Alright. That was easy enough.
All right, yeah, that's probably the easiest part.
Right.
All right, so again, this is a two-component machine. And like with any printer, this is susceptible to humidity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's especially true with the ceramic toner. So again, you want to keep your humidity between 30 and 40% is ideal. Otherwise, again, you'll get those streaks, and you also may experience color shifts. If the humidity is too high or too low, it'll print saturated or undersaturated. So you always want to keep it in a humidity-controlled environment. And if you do happen to get a streak, and what that is, it'll look like a white line through one of your prints.
Right.
You just have to access your PCUs. So you just pull this door down, lift up on this lever here, and pull the door back towards you. The only PCU that's locked into place is the black one. And so you just flip this green lever up, and then you could slide it out.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime you're handling the PCU, you just want to be sure not to touch this green drum.
Yep.
Alright? So there are two ways to clear a streak. And again, what it is just a clump of developer that gets stuck in the doctor blade, which keeps the developer mixture smooth and even. So to clear it the easy way is opposite the side from where you pulled it out. There are these two gears here. This gear will spin the photo drum, which is the green drum there. And this gear down to the lower right will spin the magnetic drum, which augers the developer mixture. And if you spin it counterclockwise, that applies the developer mixture to the magnetic drum. And if you spin it counterclockwise, that removes the developer from the magnetic drum. So when you get that streak and you want to clear it simply, you just spin this gear clockwise a few good times, nice, hard, and swiftly.
Mm-hmm.
And then before you put it back in the machine, so spinning that gear clockwise, which removes the developer mixture, sometimes can knock that clump free. And so once you've spun that a few good times counterclockwise, and you'll notice if you keep doing that it gets harder and harder to spin it. You just want to spin it counterclockwise, smooth and evenly, before you put it back in the machine.
Okay.
Alright?
So there's not an interface to the printer that'll make it do this?
No, no.
Okay.
If it was organic toner and you didn't know about the printer, and you called Brico and said, oh, I've got a streak, they'd either send a tech out to try and clear it, or they'd just
Gotcha.
have you replace the PCU. Alright, and then once you put it back into the printer, you just want to make sure it slides in smooth and evenly without any resistance, and then it'll lock into place.
Right.
Hi, allergies. Alright,
And
and
you said only the black is locked, correct?
yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Gotcha.
And then when you button the machine back up, you just want to make sure that you press on both sides there, and then lock it. And again, press on both sides.
Right.
Alright? You want to have a go?
I think I got that one.
Okay. Alright, so, let's see. We'll get into clearing streaks the hard way in just a bit. Once we I finish up walking you around the printer and that. Let's see. Reposition the camera real quickly. So we typically print from tray 1, which is this tray down here. And the decal paper goes into tray 1 with the glossy side face up. And if you were ever to print from the bypass tray, which is this tray here, it would go glossy side face down.
Okay.
Okay. And the reason you would, probably the only reason you would want to print from the bypass tray is tray 1 will only print 8.5 by 11.
Right.
But the bypass tray will print longer than that, but it only print 8.5 wide. So the decal paper comes shipped to you 11 by 17. So when you get it, you'll just have to cut it in half. And then if you ever have a reason to print longer than 11, you'll have that option.
Okay.
It really doesn't come up too much in the monument business, but you never know.
Yep.
Alright, so we'll just flip it on. Your power switch is on right down over here. Another thing I'll point out is there'll be a sticker right here on your printer that'll tell you what chemistry it's equipped with, and the number to call for tech support, and how to go about ordering supplies.
Okay.
So if you ever run into any issues, you'll definitely want to give us a call before you call Rico, and then if we can't get it figured out over the phone, we'll have you call in a tech.
So does Rico actually honor their manufacturer warranty?
Yes,
using
they will.
ceramic tone?
Mhm.
Okay, gotcha.
They say they'll honor everything that isn't touched by the toner.
Okay.
So that's just the toner cylinders, the pumps, and the inside the PCUs. But you'll find, like most things, the warranty expires before the parts do.
Sure.
So, but they will honor if anything weird about the printer happens. They definitely will honor it. Okay. So you don't ever want to turn the printer off. It needs to go through, well, just by flipping the switch, it needs to go through a shutdown phase. So to do that, you just hit the menu button and the arrow up to shut down, and then press OK. And if it's making a noise like it just was, it'll say shutdown failed, so you have to wait for it to go through its paces and stop making noises, and then you can go ahead and shut it down. Alright, and you could also, the menu, you'll have access to programming the IP address that you may be using, changing paper sizes if you need to. It'll print various small sizes, but that typically doesn't come up very often. Usually you'll just fill up the entire 8.5 by 11 with the cameo pieces and print it out. So.
Right. Does the printer have? I would have a tendency to just leave it on all the time. Does it have a sleep mode or?
Yeah, it goes into energy saver mode,
Okay.
but you definitely want to turn it off every night.
Okay.
Just because if the power does go out and it doesn't go through that
Gotcha.
calibration cycling phase, you may experience a color shift.
Okay.
And so if you're doing a long run of the same image for samples or what have you, you'll notice that the color shifts, and it will have to either be recalibrated, which is a process we do, and I'll get into that a bit later, or let's see, what else could you do? Yeah, recalibration is probably the best process once that's happened.
That's fine. I was just curious.
Yeah, we had a guy, a squirrel had gotten to the power supply, and he lost control of his humidity, and his printer just shut off immediately, and it was like a whole weekend. And he came back and his colors were just really wacky.
Yeah.
So, of course, the humidity situation you couldn't control, but you definitely want to turn the printer off not every day when you go home. You don't need to turn it off after you're, just use it once, but Yeah. Alright, then once it's ready it'll tell you and you could put the power switch. Alright, then so the last thing that happens with any printer is you get your paper jams in that. And so to clear it, you just got these two handles on either side of the printer. Pull the printer open and your paper will be lodged somewhere in there, and you just grab it and pull it out. And again, you want to push on both sides of the printer to lock it back up.
Do you find that the thicker paper has any extra jamming? Does it jam more often, or?
No, sometimes what happens is the rollers in there that pick up the paper, they'll get dirty over time, and it'll misfeed. It'll show that it has a misfeed, but you open it up and there won't be anything in there. And when that happens, the best solution for that, instead of calling out a tech and having them clean it for you or cleaning it yourself, because I think there's procedures online for that and that. It's a pretty simple process. But the best solution is to try different levels of paper. So you either take some paper out or put some more paper in and see what the optimal level is.
Gotcha.
But other than that, they feed really nicely through the printer.
All right.
Alright. Okay, so have you got any other questions about the printer at this time?
No, I don't believe so.
Alright. So we'll go ahead and move into clearing the streak the hard way and sort of how the PCU works.
Okay.
Alright. So, to clear a streak the hard way, you'll just need a Phillips head screwdriver and a piece of transparency paper. Pick it up at Office Depot or anywhere like that. Alright, so sometimes you won't be able to knock that clump of developer free just by spinning this gear. So you actually have to get inside the PCU and clear it manually. So there's a screw here and two screws there. This metal screw here takes a bit of torque, so you just want to grab on that gear and just unscrew it. Don't be fooled by this one, it's a little used. It's a bit easier than it is when they're brand new. Alright, once you get that screw out, you can pull out this gear and then remove either screw or the screws on either side. Okay, and once you've removed those screws, you just take this bracket off, and if you slide it open just like so, you can see the metal drum in there, or magnetic drum. And you'll notice if you spin it this way, see it's not oh, I guess it is full now. So spinning it counterclockwise, make sure that that developer mixture is smooth and even. And if you spin it clockwise, it'll remove that developer mixture. So what you want to do is get this transparency paper and slide it between that doctor blade and the magnetic drum, which keeps it smooth and even. Just like so. And then you'll just slide that back and forth. And about halfway you'll feel, it's not quite right. Sometimes when you're sliding it, you'll feel it click against something, but that's nothing to be worried about. It's just a little bracket inside the PCU, and because some people have done that, felt the click, and they're like, it won't go, the streak won't move, but it's not the developer. And you'll know you're in the right spot because when you remove it, it'll have some of that iron and some of the toner. And then again, you'll spin it counterclockwise, just so that the developer mixture gets even back out. And you'll put your bracket on, and that will happen quite frequently. So you just get that bearing, and I like to put my hand in the back there, and then you'll just push that bearing back into place. And this gear only goes on one way. So you just put it on, and then you'll get your metal screw. Screw it back in, and then just grab a hold of that gear and make sure it's nice and tight.
How's it going?
It's good, good.
The production team is having a conference call with Cassidy on the website.
Uh-huh.
So if you can do the color space training on your computer in your office, that'd be cool.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, Phil will just have to accommodate.
Okay.
Maybe you'll learn something.
Thanks. Okay.
How much are these, just out of curiosity, to replace? A couple $100 probably?
$160, I think.
But might as well take the time to clean them first, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you'll definitely want, because it'll happen quite frequently,
Okay.
especially with the, if you're not able to keep your humidity stabilized, and with the ceramic toner, it tends to clump up quite often. Alright.
There's the space it will be in, I know, or we may need to address it. I know there's pretty drastic swings in humidity because it's got a roll top door, so it's not exactly sealed from the outside necessarily. So, and especially in Tennessee, we get up to 60–70% humidity.
Oh yeah.
All summer long. So I might need to address that then.
Sure.
As far as dehumidifying and humidifying in the winter, so.
Yeah, it's definitely in more humid environments it's a lot more difficult. Here it's pretty easy to keep it in that range.
Sure.
Yeah. Alright, so these plastic screws are interchangeable. And you don't want to torque them too much. Just want to make sure they're nice and tight. And then it's ready to go. Yeah, whenever you operate on the PCU, it's always a good idea to use gloves like this, just in case. If you do touch the green drum, you're liable to leave a grease on there, which will show up as a fingerprint in all of your prints. So definitely avoid that and wear gloves when you can.
Alright. If you do touch it, can you clean it with alcohol, something like that, or?
No, I wouldn't recommend that. There is soft cloth like this. I'm not sure where to get this kind of stuff, but this is good for just wiping it off. But the best bet is just not to touch it.
Yeah, of course.
You'll be alright.
Why transparency paper?
Well, because it's just Mylar film. And so if you were to use like a regular piece of paper or anything like that, it
Might get fibers in there.
yeah, exactly. And then you'll end up with more streaks than you started with. Alright, so, you want to have at it?
Yeah, I can give it a roll.
Cool.
You said you always take this one out first?
Oh, no, it doesn't really matter.
No.
No.
Okay.
I always do it just because it's the hardest one.
Got it. Did I get all of them?
Yep. Yeah, there's only 3.
Okay.
And if you work your finger in, let's see. Sort of, it's like that's the best way to get at it.
So is there any way to actually see where a streak is when you're doing this?
Oh yeah. Sometimes you'll see them, sometimes you won't.
Okay.
But
Will,
it'll
will
just,
you see it basically when you do that?
no, when
will
you
see
turn
a
it
line? Or-
counterclockwise.
Oh, okay.
So go ahead.
So when you're clearing it, you see it?
Mm-hmm. And I'll just go ahead and keep turning it. It'll look something like that. See how there's that?
Yeah,
It shows
okay.
through. Yeah.
Got you. Just run it through there a few times, or
Yeah, just back and forth a few times.
alright. And then you said roll it clockwise and then counterclockwise after that.
Yeah, that should be good.
Did I miss anything in there?
No, that was perfect.
All right. Alright.
Perfect.
Great.
All right. Okay, so sometimes over time you'll run into the case where you can't clear a streak or it keeps popping back up in other places. And one thing I forgot to mention is when you do get a streak, the way to check to see which PCU has the streak. This is called the diagnostic chart. And this will be on your data disk, which comes with the printer.
Right.
So you'll just print this out, and of course whichever color has the white line through it, it'll look just like that.
Right.
That'll be the PCU that has the streak. And just sort of as a side note, this was kind of a funny thing. So I printed this, had the streak there in the cyan, tried to clear it. Oh, these are out of order. And then one showed up in the yellow, or the red, tried to clear that. Showed back up in the blue, cleared that, showed back up in the red. So after that I was done for the day.
Right.
But that's, that's sort of a freak occurrence. But again, another thing that goes bad, or something that'll happen over time, is you'll get several clumps of developer in the PCU, and so you'll have to empty out the developer and filter it just to get all because the wear and tear of the PCU and the clumps of the developer tend to build up, so you just got to filter those out. And this here is a screen. The mesh size is 106 microns, or 0.0041 inches. And so you'll use a screen similar to this. I don't think they make this device anymore, which is a vibrafilter, but you can just sift it by hand. And they come from a company called Grainger. and there'll be specs on the data disk for the screen size and where to find them in there.
Alright.
So you just have to empty out the developer and sift it. And to do that, you don't really need a flathead, but this here is called the hopper, and this mates to an end inside of the printer, which feeds the toner into the PCU. So you'll have to take this off, and to do that, you just lift it up off this little knob here, slide it forward, and then up. And then the last step is to slide it back, because it has these two prongs that fit in there. But then you have your developer mixture in there, and you just empty it out of that little port there into one of these bottles. You may not have to, you probably won't have to do this before while there's still toner in one of the bottles. You'll probably use up the toner before you have to do this process, so you always want to hang on to these bottles. They're real handy. So you'll get, just a funnel, put it inside your bottle, empty the developer into there, sift it out, refill your bottle with the toner or developer, and then squeeze that developer mixture into that little port there. And when you're doing that, you'll have to spin this gear counterclockwise at the same time. Otherwise it'll build up in there and it won't auger through, and it'll just shoot back out at you.
Gotcha.
Alright. So, once you've done that, just put your little two prongs in there, push it down, and then slide it forward so that it goes over that little knob.
Okay.
Alright? Okay, another thing that is real handy, and this is something we just learned within the past year. So this is 7/16 of an inch socket. Fits right over that gear. And so it really helps when you're, say you've got, all of your developer mixture has gone bad or something and you have to replace it, or you've got streaks in all the photoconductor units. This really helps, because you could just, I don't have the battery, but you can hit it with the screw gun and it just spins that gear real easily. And I've had built 3 or 4 printers in one day, and it really gets to your fingers, you get blisters,
Right.
So that really helps when you're working with these.
Okay.
Alright, and again, I think I mentioned that it does go bad over time, the developer mixture. They say it's anywhere between 400 and 4,000 prints, or is it 5,000, 4,000? But we typically find that you can get like 3,000 prints or so out of the developer mixture before it needs to be replaced. And that would be a few years down the way. But you would take to empty the developer mixture, you would just take this off and empty it out. And then discard it. You can just throw it away in the trash or somewhere like that. And then purchase new developer and refill them. And whenever that happens, it's always a good idea to replace the whole unit, just so that you're not battling, what's the problem? Is it the developer? Is it the PCU? Because these toners tend to be a bit abrasive on the PCUs. But that's not for several years down the road anyway. And it's, I would recommend probably doing the developer first, and then if that doesn't fix the problem, replacing the PCU as well.
Alright.
Okay. Alrighty. Is there any questions? Do you have any questions about clearing streaks or developer mixture or anything like that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. One thing I will go over, sorry I'm a bit off course today, is what happens, the reason the developer mixture goes bad is that the iron particles are much larger and jagged than the toner particles. And so over time they bang up against each other and they start to smooth out because those iron particles are jagged. And so when they start to smooth out, it'll carry less toner to the page, or to the photo drum, which transfers the toner to the paper. And you'll notice a drop in saturation when that happens. And when you notice that, the first thing you'll do is check your toner levels. And if your toner's fine and you still can't get the saturation back up, you'll check the humidity, go through all the checks and balances. You'll want to check the print count on the printer, and there will be it's just below or above paper input, and that'll tell you how many prints are on it. And again, typically it's between 4,000 or 5,000 that it's going to go bad. So if it's in that range, it's definitely most likely a developer issue. So,
All right.
yeah, you'll just notice loss in saturation, and if everything else is in check and the print count is high, then that's when you'll want to replace the developer next year.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so if you haven't got any questions about the printer or the PCUs or anything of that nature, we can go ahead and move on to color spaces in Photoshop.
Yeah, I believe I'm good.
All right, sounds good. So, what you're looking at here are 3 different color spaces laid out in the LAB color space. The red form you see there is the RGB color space, and so that's what's known as additive color mixing. And that's what you're looking at when you see anything that's backlit. It's mixing red, green, and blue light to make all the colors that you see. And so when you mix red, green, and blue light together, you get white light. So that's why they call it additive color mixing. This green form here is a standard organic CMYK color space. And that's what's known as subtractive color mixing, because more often than not, you're printing on the substrate you're printing on is white, so you take the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black away, and you get white. And this blue form here is our ceramic CMYK color space, and that's also subtractive color mixing. But what we're really looking at here, this is the LAB color space, which is a 3-dimensional way of defining color. And so what that looks like is in this space here is the LAB color space. It's a 3-dimensional color space based on mathematical equations and the way color reacts with light. So these forms here, basically what we're looking at is the color space, or the attainable reproducible colors in a particular color space. And as you can see, the RGB color space is much larger than our other 2 color spaces. So if you've ever printed something and it came out, it didn't look like what you saw on the screen, that's what's happening. It's just a much more limited color space you're transferring the image to. And this is especially true with our ceramic toners, as you can see. So it's really important to curb clients' expectations as to what they can expect as far as the reproducibility of what they're seeing in their photograph on the screen, or if it's even a printed photograph, how are you're going to be limited in reproducing the colors that they see. And with the standard ceramic CMYK, red is practically impossible to get. So you'll never be able to get a fire engine red. The most you can hope for is more like a brick red. So it's always important to curb your client's expectations as to what they're going to get from the printer. Alright, and these images will be on your data disk for future reference. of the things that we do to counter for that loss in color is when you get back to your shop and your humidity has been stabilized for 48 hours, we'll have you print out all 8 of these TIFF documents, and you'll apply them to 6x6 white tiles, fire them in your kiln, ship us the tiles, and we'll create a color profile that's distinct not only to your printer but to your process. And what that does is, in essence, it bridges a gap between what you're seeing on the screen and what the software is creating and what it's reading from the printer. So this color here is what the software is expecting to see, and this color here is what the spectrophotometer is reading it as. So it creates a bridge from this color to this color so that what you see on the screen and what's coming out of the printer are a closer match. Alright, and just to give you an idea of the differences and sort of limitations that we're experiencing is, so this is the RGB color space. This is a standard organic CMYK color space. And this is our ceramic CMYK color space. So you can see the blacks and the yellows are pretty close, but the cyan's quite a bit different, and so is the magenta. And other colors that are really hard to reproduce besides red are bright neon colors. They came out with a toner set that's a selenium red toner set, which is this one here. But as you can see, the magenta has been completely replaced by red. So where you're going to get a good red, you're not going to be able to render flesh tones very nicely. So that's why most monument companies go with the standard organic CMYK colors. I find that the selenium toner set works better for artwork and vector images and that sort of thing, whereas the standard CMYK toner set works better for images and that sort of thing. Okay. So have you got any questions about color spaces, then sort of what to expect? Another thing I can show you just to give you a good idea. So these are all color charts that you'll be printing. So that's sort of what you can expect as what you're seeing on the screen and what's going to come out of the printer.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see, you know, these pinks are pretty good, pretty close, purples are nice, but once we get to the reds here, you can see it comes more out like a brick red.
Right.
So with the standard CMYK toners, red is the primary issue with the toner set. Okay. So, we'll go ahead and move on to printing untagged documents, and then we'll go on to Photoshop work and then printing tagged documents. So what an untagged document is, it means that there's no color profile assigned to it. And with digital images and scans into your computer and that sort of thing, they're all going to be assigned an RGB color profile. Most vector images or anything that's been created in Illustrator or Corel Draw or anything like that will have a CMYK color profile assigned to it. But very rarely will you work with these untagged documents, and there's just a different way of printing these than there are regular documents. So not only is the diagnostic chart a tagged document, but the 8 color charts that you'll be printing are untagged as well. And so what it's really doing is telling the printer and the software not to have any influence on the way the colors are interpreted. So to print these, you go to File, Print, and I guess the Office is fine. So in CS4, which is which is what I'm working on, they've got this no color management feature.
Mhm.
But in CS5 and above, they've removed that, which it really makes the whole printing process brainless. But the workaround for it in CS5 and above, which you'll be working with, is here under color handling. You want to set that to Photoshop manages colors. And here under the document, it'll tell you what color profile is assigned to that. And we can see it's untagged. So the way we want to print this is to switch our printer profile to, and don't worry, you won't have nearly as many, well, hopefully none anyway, Photoshop 5 default CMYK. Alright, so that's the workaround since you don't have the no color management feature. And the reason you don't want the printer or Photoshop to have any influence on the way it's going to print, or the printer primarily, is that with these Ricoh printers what happens is if you don't maintain this color management workflow, what's going to happen is that the printer is going to mix cyan, magenta, and yellow to make black instead of just printing black. So you'll get this weird mucky sort of grayish, could be yellow, bluish sort of color. I used to have an example. I'll just print one out. But so if you ever see anything kind of kooky or crazy with your colors, that's the first thing you'll check. And then you'll move on to toner, and then after that humidity, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of the troubleshooting workflow. Okay, so any questions about untagged documents?
No.
Okay, cool. Alright, so I'll go ahead and move on to Photoshop work. Boy, today is just really off for me. I apologize, Travis. It's Travis, right? Well, at least I got one thing going for me. Alright. You just want to work with the photo? That'll be fine, I'm sure?
Yeah.
Okay. And is there anything you have in mind that you might run into that you would like to see how it's done in Photoshop?
Not necessarily. I mean, the biggest issues we're going to run into is people with bad photos.
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
a scan of a scanned photo that's grainy and,
Yeah.
you know, trying to chop things out of it. So those are going to be our biggest...
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But that looks good compared to what people give us.
Oh, really? Okay, well. Yeah, we've had some bad photos come through here, like, I think, we've even had to work with mug shots.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, and that's another thing is to explain to people, like, Photoshop is
Yeah.
not a miracle worker.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we know that, and you know, looking at this photo, that one looks super simple to edit out. You know, cut what you want, and
Yep,
put
pretty
a background
much.
on it. So, but yeah, that's the biggest thing we're going to run into is just old people with bad photos and you know,
Oh, yeah, sure.
cell phone photos from 10 years ago.
Facebook photos.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But-
I'm sure you're used to explaining to people that
Yeah.
it's not gonna.
Yeah, we try to set those expectations properly, and
Sure, yeah.
you know, but you know, at the same time, those are the ones that are a lot of work just to make look normal. So,
Sure,
as
yeah.
you well know. So
Okay. Yeah, those are pretty difficult, and depending on what the client requests, we typically don't do too much to the photo. You know, removing dust and scratches and reducing noise, that sort of thing is pretty commonplace. But it depends on the photo, I guess. If they send you some, typically if they don't ask for anything, we don't do anything except for minor adjustments. But once in the past, there was a fella here, and he made several adjustments to an old photo that was all scratched up and stuff, and they rejected it because they wanted it to be the way it was.
Right.
So it just depends on your client and communication between them,
Sure.
just to make sure that you're all on the same page and everyone's happy with the results that they get. Okay. So we always work in the RGB color space, and that's simply because RGB files are much smaller than CMYK files. Some of the adjustments that we make in Photoshop aren't available in the CMYK color space, and also most of the files that you're going to encounter are already in the RGB color space. So it's always good to work in RGB first and then convert to CMYK later. And we always ask that our clients send us images that are at least 300 dpi. But again, sometimes you'll get photos that they just send to you, and you can, if you've got a good scanner, you can scan them in at 600. Just because you always want to be going from something larger to something smaller. Alright, so the first step in our sort of workflow is, if we were just happy with the image as it was, just to begin cropping it. And so in our workflow, the way to do that is to select the elliptical marquee tool, and then here under Style, you want to set that to fixed ratio. And then you could just begin in one of the corners and, once you set it to fixed ratio, you'll type in the size of your cameo piece.
Right.
And so I always like to type the unit of measurement. So we'll do a OC9, which is 9 centimeters by 12 centimeters. And we'll just start in the corner here and click and drag at an angle to crop our image. And then if you mouse inside the selection, you could just move it around. Alright, and once you get it to look the way you want, just go to Edit and Copy. And then File, New. And you just want to make sure it says Clipboard there. Just click OK. And go to Edit and Paste. Alright, now the last step is you want to go to Image, Image Size, set this to centimeters, and under Width you just want to type in the width, which is 9, and it'll adjust the height automatically. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention is, we always work with at least 300 dots per inch. If they send us something that's smaller, like off the web or something, we'll do our best to increase the resolution, but Photoshop isn't really designed to increase resolution. There is software online you might be able to find to do that if you find that to be a common occurrence. And if it's mandatory. But pretty much, hopefully your clients will know that what they see is probably what they're going to get back. So. Alright. So now that we've got it cropped into the size that we want it to be, we can begin making our photo corrections. It's always important, I always encourage people to practice non-destructive means of photo manipulation. That way you can always revert back to the original, and in case things go horribly wrong. And there's a few ways to make photo adjustments in Photoshop. You can make the adjustments here under Image and Adjustments. And you'll see I have access to all these adjustments where you can manipulate the photo. But since we want to practice non-destructive means of photo manipulation, what you want to do is set up what's called an adjustment layer. So that's just under Layer, New Adjustment Layer. Have you ever used these before?
Yep.
Oh yeah, okay. And this is especially important to use them with ceramic printing because of the limitations in color. So in the beginning, you'll want to develop your eye to what you're seeing on the screen and what's coming out of the printer, how the printer is behaving. So it's important to run what we call color tests. So the best way to go about color testing is just to get a box of small tiles and then make 4 or 5 different renditions of the same image, and then fire it on the tile, see which one looks best, and then go from there, either make further adjustments or go ahead and pull the trigger and create the actual finished piece. And so that's why adjustment layers are so important, because you'll have 4 different documents unless you keep really good notes by writing down whatever you've done. What you've done to the image will be lost, and so if you fire something and it comes out horrible, you'll want to know what you've done and make corrections from there. And so adjustment layers are really helpful for that, because of course it creates that layer for you, and you could close the file, close Photoshop, and be able to open the file back up and see what you've done and go from there. Alright, so I'll go over the 3 that I use most common. One is the levels, next one is the vibrance, and the last one is the selective color. Alright, so we'll just start with the levels adjustment. Alright, so the the idea behind making the levels adjustment here is, or making adjustments in general, is what you see on the screen, depending on how your printer is printing and how your color profile is behaving, should be more saturated and vivid than the original image. And this is just sort of a general sort of thing. But again, what you see on the screen should be more saturated, bright, and vivid than the original image. And the idea behind making this levels adjustment is you want to pull in the shadow slider here just a bit to darken the image, and you want to balance that by pulling in the highlight slider, which will lighten the image. And that may be too much, but that's sort of generally what you're looking for. And again, it just takes some guesswork to figure out. That's probably not enough, but that gives you an idea of what you use the levels adjustment for. The next adjustment layer.
So you guys don't ever use like Lightroom for this stuff?
No, I don't. But if that's something like I'm not too familiar with Lightroom.
Yes.
But if it works, you know.
Kind of similar thing. It does these things, but this much when you need this much. You know, so.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah,
it's
so-
got more power.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah.
So I use both of them together. But
Sure. Does it like do cropping and that sort of thing?
no, so it's only, you know, levels of effects and things like that.
Huh.
So it's a good tool.
Oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so it's hard to teach somebody who already knows stuff, but
No, I mean, I need refreshers on all this anyway.
but yeah, like if that's a tool that you're comfortable using, by all means, you know,
Okay,
just use whatever comes naturally to you.
got it.
But in general, what you want to see on the screen should be brighter, more saturated than the original image.
How do you deal with you know, red saturation, since you know you're not going to get a true red?
It's a bit challenging. It's not so much the saturation with the red color. It's more like, you see this red here is going to print like
Right.
my shirt there.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of finding a happy medium between the brick red, and you also find that you get more of a orangish, maybe not orange, but just sort of a flatter kind of red. So it takes a strong understanding of color theory to work, I mean, with the limitations in color. So there's color wheels on your data disk for, you know, sort of helping you understand that. But it's all about mixing the proper amount of the cyan and magenta and yellow and black to get the results that you want. But again, reds are hard. Yeah, so I'm not sure what you would call that. I wouldn't call it orange, but those are sort of the reds you're going to get. You can get better than that, these reds here, but that's pretty much, you know, where your expectation should lie.
Okay.
As far as it either is going to be that brick red, or it'll turn into more of a pinkish red. And again, that just takes a bit of understanding. If you want it more brick, of course, you might want to throw in a bit of cyan, maybe some yellow, to try and mix those cyan, magenta, yellow, and black colors to get the optimal results. But that's all done through one of my favorite adjustment layers, which is the selective color. But before we get to that one, I'll go over the vibrance real quickly because it's quick and dirty. So we've got our vibrance adjustment layer, and if you increase the vibrance slider, sort of increase the saturation of more of the warmer colors, and again you can decrease that as well. So you could use the vibrance slider pretty heavy-handedly. But then there's also the saturation slider here, which will decrease the saturation overall or increase it. And so that one, as you can tell, you want to use with a bit more of a subtle hand. And then again, we can turn our eyeball on and off to just sort of see the adjustments that we've made. And that's pretty much what we're looking for. That gives you a good idea of what we want to use what we're trying to accomplish when we use these adjustment layers. Alright, so I'll go back to the selective color adjustment layer. Alright, and what's good about it, have you ever used that before?
Maybe at some point.
Alright, so with the ceramic printing, what we want to do, or what makes it really handy, is that we can adjust the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black levels of all of these colors without affecting the entire image. So more often than not, you'll find flesh tones in the reds and the yellows, and there's no real general approach. The most general thing I can tell you is that it's good to go into the blacks and increase the blacks just by a little bit. I'll turn that eyeball on and off and see the adjustments that we've made.
I get a call Zelda later too.
What?
I get a call Zelda later too.
Zelda?
And again, you'll find most of the flesh tones in the reds and the yellows. So if we take out the yellow, she turns a bit more pink. And so this is where your color testing really comes in handy. Is, say we've made, these adjustments, fired it in the kiln, took it out, and she just happened to be a bit too yellow. If we take the yellow out, that'll counter for some of that yellowing that may be occurring.
Thank you.
And so that's how you zero in on colors to get the most desirable results. And again, there's no real general approach. what we do is more of an art than it is a science. So you just keep that in mind when you're first beginning. It's important to experiment and play and just have fun with it when you first start.
True.
Okay. So that's probably too much. We'll pretend like we're doing this for real. Turn off all our adjustments. Have a look. So that's probably going to look pretty good once we printed it. And so that kind of gives you an idea of the level of saturation that our printer is printing at. But yours may be different. So again, it's all about experimenting. Okay. So do you have any questions about sort of the adjustments that you want to make? And
No, I don't think so.
okay. All right.
Actually, I do have a question.
Sure.
You know, things that we've seen requests for are things like borders, you know, on the photos and things
Oh,
like
yeah.
that. Do you set up like standard templates, you know, in Photoshop and things like that to just pull into, or do you create them every time?
We just create them every time.
Okay.
Do you mean like specialized borders, or?
Not necessarily. You know, just you know, so
Like
just
something like that?
correct. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, my thought process would be to set up a template, you know, where the layer, you know, layer one is just a mask basically.
Oh
With
yeah.
that on it, but-
You could
Right.
do it that way. We don't do that here because it's easy enough to do it on the fly.
Got it.
So, our process is, if we want to create a stroke is what we call that, or like that would be a stroke and that would be a full bleed, just sort of the verbiage that we use. What you want to do, and this is real easy, just go to image and image size and set it to our unit of measurement. You just want to drop it by 1/2 centimeter. Whoops.
Miss Jenny Ali.
So you just type in 8.5 in the width. Click OK. And now what you want to do is make a little bit of room to work with so we can see what's going on. So go to image, canvas size. Make sure you got relative check marked. And just type in a nice border. Whoops. Make sure your background color is set to white.
Wow, that looks like a really good lead.
No, whoops.
The only reason I say that is because it's coming from the purchasing manager.
Yeah. Okay. Alright, so now we got our area to work with. And there's a couple ways to do this. I always encourage people to learn hotkeys in that. So like Control Z for undo. Yeah, and if you ever want to know, it'll be next to it. But there's also little tricks like creating selections. So if you've got a layer like this and the background is all transparent, if you mouse over your thumbnail and hold Control and click, it'll create a selection around all of that transparent space. Alright, so now that we got a selection of our cameo piece, we'll just go to Edit and Stroke. And pick our color. Typically it's black. And as far as the pixel width, that can take a bit of guesswork. It just depends on your taste. And you want to make sure it's on outside or center.
Dixie.
And we'll say 5 pixels might be okay. Click OK. Alright. Go to select, deselect so we can see it. And now we've got that nice border. So creating a template might be just an extra step. If it works for you, but it's pretty simple just to go through that process and create a stroke. Okay, so I'll go into a bit more advanced technique with that selective color because we'll say we fired this and we were happy with everything but our lips. And if you try and adjust the reds, as we saw before, it's going to affect
On the
all of her
Express-
flesh tones. So what we want to do is create a mask or a selection of just her lips. And I'll just do it really quickly with the magic wand tool. There's more effective and more professional ways of making selections.
Take longer.
Yeah. Have you ever used the magic wand tool before? Okay. Alright, so we'll just make sure we got our layer selected.
I cut our.
And we'll go to
I made it still $400 on there.
our toolbar up here. So if you adjust the tolerance,
Don't put you with a rack, so you're gonna.
well, I'll just go into the basics. I'm skipping around. My apologies,
That's
Travis.
fine.
So the magic wand tool picks up on areas of color that Photoshop understands to be the same. So if we click there, it's obviously picking up too much colors to be the same. So deselect that. Reduce our tolerance. Now it's picking up less colors, but as you can see, it's picking up colors throughout the image.
And we don't have to send anything else with that.
And so that's what anti-alias does, is picks up on colors in the entire image that Photoshop understands to be the same. And so uncheck that and check contiguous. And now Photoshop will pick up colors that are just next to each other or touching. And of course, if we want to add to that selection, we'll just hold Shift.
Yeah, I would.
Oops, undo that. Just zoom in a bit. A couple quick commands. If you Control plus, that'll zoom in. Or if you hold Alt and use the scroll bar on your mouse, that'll zoom in and out. And then if you hold the space bar, you click and navigate around your image. So reduce our tolerance there, hold Shift, keep picking up on areas. If we hold Alt, it'll minus from the selection. And we'll just say we're happy with that for the sake of time. I prefer to use the pen tool. That makes nice, clean selections. I'm not sure if you ever used that. Yeah, cool. Alright, so once we're happy with our selection, we'll just go down here to this little half circle. That'll create our adjustment layers as well. Set up that selective color adjustment layer. And now if we increase the magentas, we can increase or decrease the saturation of just her lips without affecting the entire image. Okay, so another consequence of these toners is that they're laid down in layers. So the black gets laid down first, then the cyan, then the magenta, and then the yellow. So more often than not, your prints are going to look yellow. So you can't really tell how anything's going to look until you fire it. But another thing with that layering is that in the firing process, those colors will shift around. And so what you want to do is sharpen up the image just a little bit, just to that shifting will cause it to blur. So what you want to do is increase a bit of the sharpness to reduce that blurring. And you know, there's always filters in Photoshop for sharpening, like the unsharp masks, smart sharpen, but I like things real easy in Photoshop. And so again, if you were going to use a filter, you would want to duplicate your layer. So that way you could always revert back to the original. Of course, going back to that non-destructive means of photo manipulation. But again, I like things simple. So you duplicate your layer, and have you ever used the high pass filter?
Don't think so.
Okay. It's a real simple technique for sharpening the image up real easily. So you just go to Filter, down to Other, and High Pass. And because I use it so often, I created a hotkey for it. Alright, and so instead of like balancing a whole bunch of sliders, we've got this one slider, and what we're looking for is nice tight white lines around the subject and some of her features. So now that we got those tight white lines, we just click OK. And the last step to using this technique is to set the blending mode. Are you familiar with blending modes? You want to set that to overlay. Now if we turn that layer on and off, you can sort of see how it sharpens up areas around her eye and on her bracelet. And so that's just a real quick, easy technique for sharpening the image. But it is easy to get carried away. So again, we'll duplicate that layer, just so you can see what that looks like anyway. And go to Filter, down to Other, and High Pass. And if we increase it too much, again, we'll click OK. Set our blending mode to Overlay. And now if we turn that on and off, you can see the image is really starting to get crispy, a bit too much contrast in some of the gradient areas. So just like anything in Photoshop, you sort of want to use a subtle hand when you're doing stuff. Okay, so is there anything else you want to see in Photoshop? As far as, like, do you want to see anything removing backgrounds? Are you pretty comfortable with that?
Yeah, we got that under control.
Okay, and what about, you know, cloning out stuff?
No, fine with that as well.
Oh, okay. You're making this too easy on me. It feels like I'm cheating you.
I mean, you're welcome to go through it.
Well, have you ever used the clone stamp tool
Yeah.
before? Oh yeah, so you can remove background. So the biggest part in this whole process is developing your eye. Well, there's two learning curves. One is developing your eye for color. That's probably the biggest and the hardest, the most where people struggle. And then the other is learning Photoshop. So some people come in here and they have no understanding of Photoshop and they struggle with that a bit. But since you've got that core knowledge already, color is probably going to be your biggest issue.
Right.
And it's really important to just keep an eye on your humidity, keep that stabilized so your color doesn't shift very often. Keep an eye on your toner levels, because if you're printing and you don't check those levels and you deplete the toner cylinder, that'll deplete the PCU of toner, and then you'll be looking at more calibration and definitely a color shift. Alright, so we'll go ahead and move on to printing.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Real quick. How often do you find that people, that are new to it are redoing, things that they fired? Obviously, you're going through the calibration, kind of checking those things first, but
That's
from the way you're talking, it sounds kind of like, every other one people are redoing, and,
well, it depends
until they
on
kinda
their...
learn it, but,
Yeah, it depends on your color testing, how rigorous you are with that.
right.
Because once you figure out how your printer is printing and sort of what the intricacies of it are and how to get the colors you want in Photoshop, because sometimes it's not always straightforward. Like sometimes you think if you want to get a good green, you're going to just go into the green channel with the selective color and just throw in cyan and yellow because that makes green. But you'll find that that affects other parts of the image that you don't think are green, but Photoshop understands to be green. So it's a little the intricacies sometimes can be a challenge. It's not, you know, rocket science really, but it really just depends on how rigorous you are with color testing. I find that most people run into trouble with redos with decaling. That seems to be where most people who are familiar with Photoshop and have understanding of color theory and that run into trouble. So I wouldn't, I mean, I couldn't give you a real exact number, maybe 10-20% of the stuff you do you might be redoing.
Yeah, and our type of customers aren't going to be, you know, super picky about color over, you know.
Oh yeah, I wish
things like that.
Yeah.
So,
I wish I could say the same.
right. You know, we're not. I don't anticipate doing, you know, well we may, but you know, logos and things like that where a color is ingrained in somebody's head of what it should look like.
Oh yeah,
You know, so,
yeah.
So I think we'll be mostly safe, but as long as it looks decent, people will be
Sure.
happy.
Yeah.
But,
One of the things I had trained one of our other customers, and she said something that was really profound. She thought that the hardest part with memorial portraits was it's not that the people are unhappy with the product. It's just that act of letting go that makes it, they want to continue
yeah.
grieving and that they don't want it to be over, so she found that she was doing more redos and more touch-ups because of that more so than they were unhappy with it. So that was, and I thought that was really profound.
Sure, and that actually brings up another question that I was meaning to ask, because I see you have a printing here. How do you kind of justify to a customer that what I'm printing on my normal printer for them to look at as a proof isn't exactly what is gonna find?
Yeah, proofs.
Or is there a way to, you know, I don't know, trick a normal printer into. I'm not sure if that's one you get asked a lot or never. Because obviously that's the way to avoid redos.
Right, yeah. I've been asked that, not a lot, but by more by people who are technical and have, you know, they've got Photoshop down. And the unfortunate answer is no. What we've done for people, like, not Cameo so much as, like you were talking about, people who are into logos and that, we send them sample tiles and let them pick. Like,
Sure.
This is where we're at with color. Do you want to pick one? Is this good? Or should we keep going? Like, or is this not right for you? So the only way to like really prove something is to see it. So.
Yeah, and obviously logos are a different story if you're, you know, making a run of 1,000 of
Yeah.
them, but nobody wants 1,000 pictures of their deceased loved one, I don't think.
No, I couldn't imagine the scenario, but you never know.
That'd be good business, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. So when we do proofing, we just proof for the crop. And if we had to remove a background, the color of the background, well, not the color of the background, but primarily just what the Cameo is going to look like. And then we specify, you know, this is not for color. It's not going to look the same as it does on your computer screen, never will. This is just for placement. And especially like, you see here they wanted the wedding cake removed and wanted them squeezed in a bit more. So
Right.
that's another thing you would send off as a proof.
Sure.
So yeah, no colors. You just have to educate them and tell them that, you know,
Right.
it may not look. I mean, you can get pretty darn close to what you see on the screen, but
Yeah.
you can't always promise that.
Yeah, and I mean, like I was saying, 99% of the cases in our business, people want hair, the color's slightly off.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
So that's
I
awesome.
might notice, but they would never notice.
Yeah. Yeah, we tend to be our biggest enemy, or
Right.
yeah, biggest
Critics,
enemies
yeah.
here. Yeah. Okay. So, if you don't want to see anything else in Photoshop and you're good with, you know, using cropping out and things like this, sort of moving stuff around, I guess we'll just move on to printing.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. And this will demonstrate what I was saying before, is like there's no real proofing. So, alright, so again, we always work in the RGB color space, and then when we're ready to print, that's when we convert to CMYK. So what we want to do is go to File, New, and then you could create a preset, because we have so many different printers and different color profiles. I don't have a preset set up, but you can make one yourself from that. But the specs are, the width is 8.5 by 11, or whatever size paper you're printing to. Resolution is 300. Now you can print at higher than 300, up to 1200, but when you get up that high and you're saving files out, as I'm sure you know, that dramatically increases your rendering time. So you may find yourself sitting there 5, 10, 15 minutes just trying to save out a file if you're working at higher resolution. And with ceramic printing, I've ran tests, and there's not that much difference between 1200 and 300. That's really more for large formatting, you know, billboards and that sort of thing. So 300 is optimal, and the human eye can't really distinguish much more over that. So what's next? Color mode will be set to CMYK, and bits are just like resolution. You just need to make sure that the bits match from document to document, and I think I've only run into that as an issue once or twice before. So if you notice when you convert from RGB to CMYK that the image distorts, always check your bits and your resolution to make sure they match. And then check your image size.
Right.
Alright, so down here is where you'll pick your color profile. And if you don't see it, you just click on this little button here and that'll pop up. Alright. And so we'll just pick one of our latest color profiles. Let's see. Alright. So the conversion is real simple. Up here is your docking bay. Oh, and your color profile will have the name of your company and then date afterwards. I'll also point out that Photoshop comes stock with organic color profiles, all these up here, and you may even have profiles from other printers that are hooked up to your computer. It's okay to use these. More often than not, you'll find that they're just don't have the same representation, accurate representation as the color profile that we create for you, but they are, don't think of being stuck to a certain color profile. Think of them as tools for your arsenal, so to speak. So if you're not happy with the color profile that we created for you, and with certain images, I'm sure you'll find that it works best for most, but some images it may not. Feel free to experiment with some of the other color profiles, and we'll sort of print out what we've done here in 2 different color spaces just so you could see the differences. So I'll just pick a color profile, just one of our standard stock color profiles. Alright. I'll go back to our ceramic color space. And if you want to know what color profile it'd be assigned to a document, just go to Edit, Convert to Profile, and here under Source Space, it'll tell you what profile has been assigned to that.
There you go. You're picking up a DOA.
Okay, so when we're ready to print, the conversion process is real simple. You could go to Image, or excuse me, Layer, and then Flatten Image. Or you could right-click on your Layers palette, Flatten Image. A million ways to do the same thing in Photoshop. So the reason we flatten it, not only is it, will some of those adjustments we've made not convert over to the CMYK color space, but you're going to want to maximize the area of your decal paper. And so you're going to have different adjustments to different images, and if you don't flatten the image, the adjustments you've done to one image will affect everything that's underneath it. So, alright, so again, conversion, real simple. You just drag your layer once it's flattened and drop into the RGB color space. And so there is our soft proof. So you can imagine what someone's going to think if you send that to them as a color proof. The reason this happens is a lot of people will start freaking out at this point and making further adjustments because they'll think, oh my god, this just looks awful. But the reason it looks this way is because the RGB color space is trying to mimic the CMYK color, or the ceramic CMYK color space, and it has no idea what it's dealing with. It's just nothing. I mean, it's such new technology that nothing has been done to enable people to soft proof. So that's why it looks like that. So you can't really know how something's going to look until it's printed. And just to give you a further idea of these color spaces that we're working with, again, RGB file, conversion is real simple, drag and drop into our CMYK file. And now you can see it still doesn't look the same as the RGB color space, but because Photoshop knows and is familiar with this CMYK color space, it can more accurately represent what it might look like when it's printed. Okay. So, do you want to go through the cropping process yourself, or is it pretty self-explanatory?
No, got that handled.
Okay. I hate when it's too easy like this because it makes me feel like I'm not doing a good job.
No.
Alright, so, just to give us some good decaling practice, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do, no, I guess I can just get rid of it. Is I'll create what we call full bleed at a small size. When you're decaling, anything that's convex or concave is much more difficult to decal. And with these porcelain pieces, the smaller the porcelain, the more convex that form is.
I sent an email.
Alright, so we'll just put this up there. Okay, and again, we'll select our elliptical marquee tool. Punch in the size of our cameo piece, so I'll be making an OC2, which is 5 centimeters by 7 centimeters. Again, we'll just drag our oval. Now surround, get it cropped the way we like. And again, edit, copy, file, whoops, file new. Make sure it says clipboard. Click OK. Edit, paste. Alright. just go ahead and convert again. Drag our layer. Oh. Just want to make sure you got your document selected that you need to. Grab the layer, drag and drop. Whoops. I skipped the sizing. Alright. Image size. Centimeters. Alright, 5x7, click OK. Drag and drop onto our print page. And again we'll do that on our ceramic CMYK page. And now we'll go ahead and print it out. So is there any questions about the conversion process? No. Okay. Alright, so now we're going to go to File, Print. Pick our printer, and I'll go through these presets that are distinct to our ceramic printing real quickly with you. But you have your data disc for, or excuse me, your training DVD for future reference. And also once you get your printer in its own environment, humidity's been stabilized for at least 48 hours, you give me a call here and we'll set up a meeting, or I'll talk it over with you through the phone, over the phone, and we'll create a preset for you so you don't have to do this every time, but we'll go through them. So you just click on page set, and I forgot to ask, or did I, are you on a Mac or a PC? PC. Okay, cool. Alright, so here under media type, you want to set that to thick 3. Click on this detailed settings tab, scroll over, and click on the print quality. You want to set the gradation to fast. Let's set the resolution to 1200 dpi. Dithering and image smoothing will be set to auto. And then you just click on this detailed settings tab. The gray reproduction will be black by K. Check mark the black overprint and set the color profile to user setting. And then the last thing we do is here under the PS options, you want to set the PostScript output option to encapsulated PostScript. And then all the other settings are just default. And then this tab will light up and you can click on that and register them as a preset, so you just double check and make sure that's selected when you go to print, and you'll be good to go. Alright, and again, the last part and the most important part of the process is your color handling. So now that we see here under document, you see that we've got a profile assigned to this document. What we want to do is set the color handling to Photoshop Manages Colors, and instead of, as before, we have that Photoshop 5 default CMYK, what you want to do is set that to sorry, I'm going too fast. You want to set the printer profile to match the document profile instead of setting it to that Photoshop 5 default CMYK. Alright, now that that's set, we're ready to print. Actually, I'm just going to set it to, I picked the wrong printer. No color management, since that feature is available. Alright, and just so you can see the differences in our adjusted images and our different color spaces, we'll print this one out as well. File, print. And alright, check our presets again. And again, now that we have a different profile You want to set that to Photoshop Manages Colors, and then sync up our printer profile with our document profile. Alright, and then send it off to the printer. Okay, so have you got any questions about the printing process or converting or anything at all at this point?
I don't think so.
Okay. Alright, so if you don't mind, I'd like to take a short break and then alright, so this would be your laminator. All you need to know about it is when you're ready to use it, you just turn it all the way up to the highest setting. It'll take a couple hours to get to the optimal heat the first couple weeks that you use it. It'll also put off a funny smell. But after those first initial weeks, once the ready light comes on, that means it'll be ready to go. But just keep that in mind that you want to warm it up for at least 2 hours when you first get it. Alright, so you have an option between two different lamination papers. You'll probably want to just stick with the flux, which is this yellow. The non-flux is used for hiding what's known as the flux shadow. But let me grab you an example of that real quick. So, this is an example of a flux shadow. So that's what's left behind if you just buy the lamination paper. A non-flux doesn't leave that shadow. But what it does is make the part a bit more matte. Unless it's porcelain, porcelain fires about the same gloss level because it's a bit softer. But this tile has more of a matte finish. There's an example of a streak right there. And there's also, a subtle color variance between the two. So, if you were to expand your business for whatever reason, get into anything else, you might consider the non-flux lamination paper because it doesn't leave that flux shadow behind. And if you wanted to decorate, say, a mug or a plate or something, and you didn't want to cover the entire surface, you would use that non-flux. Otherwise, you'd have to hide the flux shadow, otherwise it'll look like a sticker has been put on there. So, you'll probably just be sticking with the yellow lamination paper, and just remember that it's always separated by these sheets of tissue paper, and that's just to keep them from sticking together. Alright, and I'll point out at this time that the toner doesn't fuse to the paper, so it's easy to scratch it off. So just be careful when you're handling it. And the idea here is you want to cut the image down on 3 sides. You don't want to cut it flush, you want about an 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch extra of the laminate. Otherwise, in the firing process, if you were to cut the image flush, the toner would peel back, so it needs that little bit of extra lamination to hold it down to the substrate. Which is why you can never really get rid of the flux shadow unless you use the non-flux. Okay, so these cutters come in real handy. They don't come with your system, but they're great to use. So the idea behind using it is if you line up your printed image with the edge of this blue ruler here, and just cut it, it'll leave you with a perfect extra bit. So we want to cut that down on 3 sides. that fourth side longer. And because the lamination paper is the most expensive part of the process, you want to, conserve as much of it as you can. And easiest way to remember this, so you won't, unless the paper was completely saturated with images, you wouldn't laminate the whole sheet. That's why you want to cut it down. And the easiest way to remember how this works is that the printed image mates to the color on the lamination paper. So I always like to do this color to color. Just lay that on top like so. And then cut off all of the excess. So with this particular cutter, to do the excess, you just sort of eyeball it at the edge of this metal side here. Make that cut. And then you shift it up so you've got your extra side sticking out. Cut off your extra again. And then just turn on your motor.
No way to damage the flux paper.
Oh no,
I mean,
no.
not easily.
No, not easily.
Obviously you can't wad it up, but.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to do that.
No-
But yeah,
No way, just normal handling.
correct. The scraps do get dirty, so it's good to keep it covered. That dirt will affect the way the image fires. And also, one thing I'll point out is it is light sensitive, but that doesn't affect, so you can see there's different shades in there because of the way the light's hitting it, but that doesn't affect the lamination. Just a little sensitive. Alright, and so it doesn't matter which way it goes in, you just stick it in, slide it through. This is by far the most exciting part of the process. You just pull it out, turn off your motor. You don't want to leave that running constantly. You don't need to let it cool down or anything. You just peel off that backing. And that's why you leave that side longer, the decal paper longer, so that's easy to peel off. Alright, and the last step is to cut down the excess. It doesn't have to be perfect. Alright, there you have it.
So this is no longer.
No,
It's
it's,
fused on there.
yep, it's, well, it's still not fused to the decal paper, but it's protected by the laminate, so it's extremely sturdy at this point. Alright, you want to have a go at making some?
Yeah, I can do that.
Alright. So, go ahead and make those two, and I'll make the other one.
Just cuts this way.
Both ways.
Yeah.
Alright.
So generally you want to just print out as many as you can on every
Yep.
page.
Exactly. Sometimes you can't always do that, especially if you're experimenting with another color profile on that, but the decal paper is pretty cheap. It's like 30 cents for 11 by 17.
Gotcha. So you want to line this one straight edge up, basically.
Yeah, and you want to just cut it flush, just to remove the excess on that side. once you get that side cut down, you could shift it up so that the long side sticks out. Yep.
Just cut off that bottom part.
That's correct.
Daniel at ABP. Mary Beth? You? Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I don't think.
Tell me it's nothing worth stealing.
Use this from that.
Yep.
Line 2, correct?
Correct. Perfect.
Okay. Doesn't matter as long as they're on the yellow, right?
Uh-huh. Just
So
two.
yellow is ready. That's what-
Correct. Uh-huh. Oh, that's a reverse motor.
Okay.
Hardly ever use it. If you put it into the machine at an angle and it starts to feed into the side, you would want to reverse it. Or if something got stuck in there, you could reverse it out. But it's not hard to use it.
So you said it doesn't matter how it goes in?
That's correct. I always like to put it in with the extra side sticking out this way.
Okay.
That way, there's no chance that the paper shifts around and you miss your lamination.
Gotcha.
And keep in mind, you don't want to send anything too small through here because it'll stop and it won't come out this side, you won't be able to pull it out.
Okay.
But if you do that, it's not possible. You just send another larger decal through and it'll push it out.
Gotcha.
I think that's why we eat. What kind of complaint?
It's,
Yeah.
Correct.
That's great.
I'm trimming these, correct?
Correct.
Is it necessary to trim them?
Gotta love the pickles. Yeah, you want to cut off all that excess, otherwise it'll be there and you can't wrap it.
Oh, okay.
Because, yeah, the laminate will still stay.
So I'm still not going straight to the line now, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We can eat whatever you guys are ready.
All right, sounds good.
Ready?
And we'll go ahead and make that last one, and I guess we'll have lunch. Guess we can stop the camera. Okay, so first thing you want to start with is water that's warm, not too hot, not too cold. If it's too hot, it'll melt the decal, and if it's too cold, it'll take it forever to really pop. You're going to need some 91% isopropyl alcohol. You just get a bit of that. Wipe off your porcelain piece. That just ensures that there's no dirt or grease on the porcelain that might cause defects in the filing process. Alright, so you just dunk your decal. Do the easy ones first and then the hard ones. So the idea is you just, really all you need to do is get the whole thing submerged. You don't want to leave it in the water too long, otherwise the starch that's on the decal paper will start to dissolve in the water. And that's what helps it adhere to the porcelain. And that'll cause defects as well. Alright, so what I like to do is just sort of get it in a general position and just pull it back a little bit, and then with 2 fingers you should just be able to slide it off, and then slide out the backing. And just be sure you throw all the scraps and that sort of stuff away, because that starch is real sticky, and if it dries like on the table or on the floor, it's really hard to clean.
Gotcha. So all this alignment is guesswork?
Well, at first, yeah, but you've got plenty of time to get it in the exact position.
Okay.
Alright. So once you get it into position, another thing, what I like to do is hover over the top of it, so that when you position it, the border looks nice and even. That way,
So I assume you're kind of wrapping this around so you can see the correct outline, correct?
correct, yeah.
Okay.
And the reason you want to sort of hover over the top of it, like look at it straight on, is because when it's mounted, that's the way you're going to be seeing it. And so if you try and align it at a different angle, the border might look a little different or off when it's mounted. Okay. So you'll get 2 squeegees with your system. And you can cut these down to various sizes if you want to. Sometimes they're a little big. But the idea behind using it is you just take this tapered edge here, put that on top of the decal, and what you want to do is start from the center and go out. And just wick all that water off. And
So can you re-wet this if it dries out too quickly?
I wouldn't recommend it. It's probably a possibility, but
Just make it there.
yeah. You just don't want to risk, if you're going to ruin a piece of porcelain, you might as well read the start from the beginning, if there's a chance, And you can use a bit of force. That decal is pretty stable right now. You can still rip it by squeegeeing it, but you don't want to do the squeegee too lightly.
Are you concerned about anything outside the actual portrait?
Not
Such
just
as the
yet.
wraparound type?
Yeah, yeah. The squeegeeing just is a process of removing the water. As long as it's in position still, it should be good. You shouldn't have to worry about it. Alright, then you'll get a clean paper towel. You don't want to use keep the alcohol away from your decal because that'll eat the lamination paper. You just put your clean paper towel over the top, and you'll get one of these sprayers with your system. And it's It's the same process as the squeegee. You just start from the center and roll out. You'll notice that that paper towel will start to absorb some of that moisture that might be trapped behind the decal still. Once you've done that, put the paper towel on. And do it again with the paper towel on. You can never roll it too much. That's really where you ensure that there's no bubbles or water moisture trapped behind the decal, which will cause defects in the firing. So what happens is if there's moisture back there, once the kiln ramps up to a certain temperature, that moisture will evaporate, and that air will get trapped, and then punch a hole through your toner once it gets to a certain temperature. All right.
And the marks we're creating here don't matter really?
No.
From this plastic scratches.
No, those will all sort of melt together in the firing process, unless you scratch the toner.
Right. So is there any way to just let these sit for a day and they dry, or is this non-permeable?
In the beginning, you want to let it sit for 3 or 4 hours, just depending on your comfortability. But as you get more comfortable with your decaling, you can just decal something, put it in the kiln, fire it, and be good to go. There is, like 20 minutes is a good wait time. But if you're in a hurry, the part really has to ship the next day. There's a few tricks you can use. You set the decal part on your laminator, which will help ensure that there's no water moisture trapped behind it.
So heat will extract moisture before you fire it?
You don't want to leave them sit around for a day or anything like that, because accidents happen.
Sure.
Someone might drop something on it, and also if you leave it somewhere where it's too cold, like in the winter or something, that will make the decal release from the porcelain. So it's always best to fire it the same day you decal it. But you can have a decal, and that will last you, a month or so. Even longer. The problem is they can get a little crispy, so the longer you wait to decal a decal, the more likely you are to scratch it or tear it during the application process. All right, too easy, right?
Excuse my look. Can you, so visually, can you tell if there's water in there?
No. Yeah, I always get asked that, and there's no way to be able to tell, and that's what sort of drives you crazy sometimes. But so you just want to perfect the decaling process, and it's really not difficult once you get the hang of it. You can really blast parts out really quickly, but you definitely want to be really attentive the first few times you have to go at it. And definitely don't forget the alcohol part. That's vital. Alright, so at this point, they're pretty easy to take off. Like, say we were to notice, oh, there was a scratch there, crap, I have to start over. Pretty easy to get off. Just kind of got to work it, peel it off. But if they sit for an hour or so, they stick on there pretty well. But you just soak it in water and it'll come off. Alright? Too easy, right?
Too easy.
Okay. Let's see what you think about the next one.
Doesn't sound good. Is I supposed to peel this off, or?
No, you can leave it off. I'll get it later. Alright, so as I was saying before, you can see these parts are more curvature. And also what we're doing is a full bleed, so it's going to wrap around the sides. And since this image is flat, it's not always the easiest thing. So, same process. Just start with your alcohol. Clean your porcelain. Same thing, just a little different, takes a little bit more work, a little bit more patience. Quite a bit more patience, actually. Put it on, slide it off. Again, you'll start with your squeegee. And this time, it's not really, it's most helpful if you just get it off the top and not try and worry about sticking the decal with the squeegee. So just kind of go around the edges and lick that water off. Now, go ahead and pick it up, and you'll see that you've got all those ridges everywhere, and it's not sitting right. So, what I like to do, you can use the palm of your hand, that works really well, but I like to use my thumb, more control. So you just go around the piece and get all those edges down. Actually, I think a combination of the thumb and the palm works really well. And you'll notice it might slide a little bit, so you're trying to get those peaks down and keep it in place at the same time. And you really kind of want to be gentle when you go around those edges, because the toner might crack from stretching or being forced to lay flat. So as you can see, it does take quite a bit of patience and time. Eventually it'll start, as it dries, it'll start to stick better. That one actually went really nicely for me. And you want to look around the edges and make sure, you kind of want to feel with your finger that there's no peaks or no bumps. It should be smooth.
When you say edges, are you talking about the printed edges or?
Yeah, the edges of the porcelain, the printed
Oh.
edges. Yeah.
So like edges like these, we're not as concerned with?
No.
Okay.
I like to get those down because I
Yeah.
grow OCD. Yeah. Can never be too safe, right?
So what does a fold look like if you fire it?
It'll look like either it'll sort of be a half bubble or a multiple layer of toner, so it'll be darker and it'll actually have a texture to it, because that toner's been doubled up on top of itself. Right. So once you get all those edges down, you just, same process, use your paper towel, roll it, and then roll it without it. And then after I roll it, I like to go back again and check and make sure those edges come back up.
Assuming a tear like I did there, isn't that a big deal? As long as it's off the printed area?
You would probably want to reprint that, but because it's hard to see, but it has sort of gone into the printed area, just but that side is so light.
Right.
So that would be a judgment call if you wanted to redo it or not. If it was like black, you would definitely want to redo it. Yeah, yeah. But you'll get, you know, sort of that, oh, it's going to be fine, or I should redo that, sort of instinct over time. Let's have a look. Think it's good?
You tell me.
Yeah.
There at the bottom it kept coming up, so.
Yeah, very good. I mean, that's really well done for your first go. There is a little crack in it though.
Yeah,
So you want to,
top or, yeah.
yeah, you want to keep an eye out for stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for your first time, that's really good.
Great.
All right. You know, most people, like, I have them do this and they're like, oh no, we're not going to be offering those parts because they have such a rough time with it, you know. But there's other tricks to getting that flat decal to wrap around curved surfaces. One is you can put, before you decal it, put the porcelain on a laminator and let it warm up, and also use really warm water. The warmer it is, the more malleable the decal becomes. So, another trick is, even once you've got the decal on there, you can actually put it in the microwave for, you know, like 10 seconds or something to warm it back up if it gets too dry and it's not sort of working, it's not flexible anymore. So that's another trick too, yeah, applying decals to curved surfaces. Heat is the key to those curved surfaces.
And you said you do still roll this just the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you find that with doing ones like this, they're more likely to have unknown moisture baked into them? Because obviously it's harder to get the water out if you're,
Yeah,
also
yeah.
wrestling with the edges.
That's a good question. I don't think there's more of a concern. It does seem like there would be, but I wouldn't say yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, another thing for those curved surfaces is this is made by a company called Mud Tools, and it's just the same sort of squeegee, but it's got more flex and more give to it, so it's easier to squeegee those curved surfaces.
And you always want to use something that's plastic, metal, anything like that?
No, you wouldn't want to use something metal. That would be too abrasive, and most definitely that would scratch it. All right.
All right. Feel good about that.
Okay. Have you got any questions?
So is there and this may be kind of the same answer as you gave me about, doing templates for, edging and things like that, but, have you found that any customers, set up a layout template and, print points or anything like that, just to make sure you're dead on center or anything like that?
No. It's more, because you have to trim, you're going to have to trim everything off anyway.
Right.
So it's more of an eyeballing skill. The only thing with templates, because these are all really good. They are all made the same size. You don't have to worry about measuring it each time you do one.
Yeah.
But that's with the ovals and the rectangles and squares. The hearts, on the other hand, can be various. They have a lot of variability in their shape. So that's something you would want to do a template for. And the best way to make a template for the hearts is to scan it. You could put it on a scanner, put the top down and scan it, and then do sort of like a high contrast scan, and then that way you can easily make the shape in Photoshop with like the magic wand tool or something like that, and then use that as your template. So hearts are the only thing that really, with the porcelain cameo industry, those are the only things that have that sort of variability where you would want to make sure that it's going to work. But as far as, you know, OC6, OC7, you just need the measurements, type that in, make your crop, and it's perfect every time.
On things like, you know, if you guys were doing dinnerware or things like that, you know, how do you still eyeball that?
As far as placement?
Yeah.
Yeah, the placement, definitely eyeball. So got some plates here. You can see like where that flux shadow is on that rim. So we cover the whole thing. Yeah, but as far as, because these are two different decals, right? Sure. So you would, like what I do when I'm doing a plate or something like that, is I'll take a reference in the proof image and then make points. So like that cat's point, your ear points, you know, just roughly to the serif of that T. So line it up that way. Because you can't...
As far as centering and things like that, you're still eyeballing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just as a side note with plates, they're not like porcelain. You could make a template for one plate, try and decal another plate, and it doesn't work. So we have to make sort of flexible, lenient templates that aren't too big or aren't too small, just sort of the right medium, so that they fit the majority of the plates, and the rest we can sort of make go into place. Yeah, but centering and that sort of stuff, once you've done it, you know, a few times, you get a real good eye for it. You just want to make sure that on those, when it has a border, that border is nice and even. That's how we look. Yeah, it's a little heavy at the top, but not bad. Meaning the decal's a little low. That's the way yeah. Or a little heavy at the bottom, however you want to think about it. I should have left mine, but yeah, that's not bad, you know? So yeah, working on position can be hard, especially with horizontal cameras. Those are really hard to get right, so you want to take a lot of time and make sure the border looks even all the way around. And then you really don't have to worry about, like, that's going to leave the shadow, but because of the positioning and where it's going to be mounted, that's never been, no one will ever notice that.
So would you, I mean, just as an air of caution, would you cut this larger so that you don't see, so that there's no chance of a shadow?
Oh, if you were concerned about it, it's never been an issue. I mean, if you really wanted to be meticulous in that, you know, absolutely. Yeah. I'll show you a fired piece and see if you can find that flux shadow and see if how noticeable you think it is, and then you can make assessments on that. But other than that, is there anything else you want to go over again, or because that's pretty much?
So as far as, I mean, you know, I know nothing about the firing process, obviously. So are you going to tell me anything about that?
There is. Do you have a kiln?
Yes, somewhere.
Do you have a digital?
Or we bought one, but I don't know where it is.
Oh yeah, of course you did. Yeah, it should have come with the digital program.
Okay.
And then there's a what's known as a ramp hold firing program on the data disk. And so what that is it's a slow fire program. It's about 13 hours. So what we always do is fire at night, and you're going to want to do that anyway because it smells horrible when it's firing, and it sort of puts off smoke that burns your eyes. I don't think it's hazardous. I hope it's not. But anyway, so it's a 13-hour firing program. It's known as a ramp hold firing program. And there will be a procedure in the kiln's owner manual for operating the digital kiln or program device. And so what it does is it'll start at room temperature, whatever temperature it may be at, and then ramp up at a certain degrees per hour to another temperature. And I can't remember it all off the top of my head. But then it'll hold there, so hence the ramp hold. And I think on the firing program it's referred to as soak, but those words are interchangeable. So it holds at that temperature for, you know, a few hours or so, and then ramps up again at another set degrees per hour. And then it'll hold at that temperature again, and then it'll ramp up once more to the final temperature. And then it'll, I think it holds there for a little bit, and then it cools down. So
But it's kind of a no-brainer, it sounds like you're saying, is
yeah,
you load the stuff in there and
you learn how to do it and then plug the numbers in. Yeah.
I assume there's instructions that will come with our stuff to do that, right?
There should be with your kiln's owner
I
manual.
hope so.
Yeah, I would hope so too. But if not, you can call the company and they'll have somebody there who can walk you through the process. And if you run into troubles, they'll be able to walk you through the process as well.
Okay. Seems all reasonable and easy enough.
Cool. Can I show you anything else, or?
So as far as you know, things like hearts, is there anything different, you know, to keep in mind for different shapes, or?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. With the rectangles, the corners can be a bit tricky. So it might be a good idea to make it just a wee bit smaller than the exact measurement, just a tiny bit. So because when you decal corners like tiles and that, you know, they're sharp, and they tend to either fold in on themselves and you don't notice it, or when you're decaling, you'll rip it. You have to start all over. But other than that, everything is pretty straightforward, besides the hearts. So, I can't see it. I was going to see if I could see it, but
Yeah, probably because it's on a curve. You're never gonna see it because of the light anyway.
You have to look really, really hard anyway.
Yeah, can't see it.
That was pretty quick. I feel like I'm sort of shortchanging you.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'd say a lot of the Photoshop stuff
Yeah.
is really quick.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would take hours with somebody who'd never seen Photoshop. So
Yeah, and that tends to eat up a bit of time.
yeah. But no, I think it seems reasonable to me.
Cool. So my biggest piece of advice for you is to use as much tech support as you can get.
Okay.
Especially like if you're banging your head against something, like I'm typically always here except vacation, but yeah, just call and ask questions.
Okay. So are you guys our first point of contact for anything, or?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So when you want to order supplies, except for decal paper, the decal paper you can order from a company called Ceramic Solutions. That's where we get ours. And that information will be on the data disc under suppliers list. You can either order porcelain through us or go directly through Italy. Depends on the quantity that you're going to be doing. It's because of the freight from overseas that can be quite expensive. So if you're at the point where the price break makes sense, you don't have to get porcelain from us. But all the other supplies that are distinct to the Enduring Images process, the toner, developer, and lamination paper, you'll just place an order with Ron, and he'll send that order off to MZ Toners, and then they'll direct ship you all the supplies that you have ordered.
As far as support, are you guys our first point of contact? Or?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. You always want to call us before you call Rico, and that would be I imagine your only other form of support except for the kiln. But that's typically never an issue. The owner's manuals are really pretty good. I think it's only been a problem once where I had to refer somebody to their kiln manufacturer, and I think it was because the owner's manual wasn't included. Yeah, which makes a big difference. But and your kiln should come with some basic furniture, but you can look online, and I don't know of a company anymore, because there used to be a company here in Colorado that made these double stackers. But you can find single stackers online, and that's really helpful for maximizing the space in your kiln and that.
Okay.
Let's see, what else can I think of? Other than that, yeah, we would be your first point of contact. If you need to, your PCUs, say your PCUs have gone bad in that over time, you would want to contact us first, and then we would probably direct you to Rico to order the PCUs in that, and then we could either help walk you through the process of exchanging the device, or like say if you lose your training DVD in that. But yeah, other than that, we would be your first point.
Okay.
And if not, then we could refer you to someone who would be able to help you.
You'll always know where to go.
Yeah, yeah. And some things, like with the printer, we won't be able to solve over the phone, but that's down the road. You know, every sort of instrument kind of fails over time. Sure, like something goes wrong, but and typically we're really good about fixing the problem over the phone. So. All right. You want me to show you anything, or have a walk? Did Phil walk you around the